I'm here with Angela Cordell Bilger, and she's a horn player from Philadelphia. And I'm so excited to have her here with me today because I've been waiting actually a long time to interview her, and I've been really looking forward to it, Angela. And I'm so sorry that's taken me so long to get you on here. Life happens with 2020, but now that's over. Thank goodness.
Great. Well, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And I'm so excited for you to share your story because you do such a, I just want to say I have so much, I'm so proud of you for doing the work you do with sharing musician stories on your own website about other injured musicians as well. I mean, it's so great to be able to share the stories, and especially being horn players too. It's like, I don't know why I feel like with our specific instrument, it's hard to talk about injuries for some reason. So it just means a lot having you on here because I really look up to you in the work that you do.
Well, thank you. And, whatever I can do to contribute to creating a community for people who needs support during an injury is great. So. Yeah,
and a fantastic writer, I have to say too. Fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, let's go ahead and if you could just introduce yourself for those who may not know you that play other instruments from far away or something. Just give us a background on like kind of your upbringing. What really got you into music?
Well, I grew up in a musical family. Both of my parents are music teachers. My dad is a band director, and my mom is a piano teacher and also a choral teacher. And so I grew up around music and in sort of a music education setting. I grew up watching my mom give piano lessons out of our house and being at marching band practices after school from a very young age. So I was surrounded by music, and but also I would say that very young, I found myself incredibly moved by music, and found it to be such a beautiful world. And I've felt from a very young age that I just wanted to be part of that beauty to communicate that to other people because it felt so profound to me. So I started piano when I was 6, and my mom taught me from age 6 through when I graduated from high school. And then I joined the band in 5th grade in my dad's band.
Oh, wow.
And decided to play the horn. One of my mom's piano students, who was 4 years older than me, also played the horn, and I admired her and loved her. So it sort of gave me the idea in the first place to play the horn, and also the fact that I had a sort of solid musical background already always helps when you're starting the horn, because it's such a difficult instrument to start on.
Yeah.
Just to produce a sound, let alone if you don't even know the musical language yet, if you're not already, if you don't know what C is and how to read it on the staff, and what it sounds like. And so anyway, so I played horn, and I sort of played horn and piano with equal intensity, I guess, with equal seriousness, right alongside each other all the way through high school. And then at some point I realized that maybe horn would be a good way for me to go. And I threw myself into that. And I went to Florida State for my undergraduate, and I continued to play piano through my undergraduate, but was a horn performance major. And then, I sort of just threw myself into it, and then I went to Juilliard for my master's degree. So I moved to New York.
Wow.
And then after that, I got a job as co-principal horn in Mexico, in an orchestra in Mexico. And so I moved there for a year And that was an amazing experience, full of highs and lows, as I think any postgraduate first job is in especially foreign country. So, and it was also funny because I had studied French and German in high school and college, and then I found myself in a Spanish-speaking country, and so I was like, well, I guess I'll learn Spanish. And so, yeah. So, and then I moved back to New York and decided to see what I could do. And I really had no idea how it was going to play out. I was looking at jobs working at, tea houses and cafes and all kinds of things. And then, but yeah, little by little, I was able to get some work. And so I freelanced there for about 6 years, I think it was.
Wow.
Yeah, 6 years. And then I took an audition for a 1-year position with the Philadelphia Orchestra for fourth horn, and got that. So I moved to Philadelphia, and that's where I met my husband. And so I stayed in Philadelphia even after that 1 year was over. And so I continued to freelance in Philadelphia, subbing with the Philadelphia Orchestra, but playing with lots of groups around town, the opera, with whom I now have, I'm now second horn, so I have a permanent position with the opera now. Yeah, so freelancing, and then I had one more 1-year position with the Philadelphia Orchestra as fourth horn in the 16-17 season. And wow. So that's sort of the grand arc of my career up to this point.
Wow. Well, I mean, what a career. And I have to say that I really love Philly. I've only visited the East Coast once, and it was to Philadelphia. And I absolutely loved it. I fell in love with Philly when I visited there. It's just like, there's something about it.
It's a great town. I love it.
Yeah. Well, I'm so proud of you and all the work that you do with your playing, and how, I just want to say how, coming from somebody who, well, I don't want to say like I'm not adaptable with change very easily, but just the risk you're able to take to be able to develop the career that you had, like going to Mexico and everything. It sounds like such an adventure that you've been on.
Yeah, you could call it an adventure, and I don't know where that comes from particularly. I'm not exactly a risk taker innately, but I guess when you love something and you just throw yourself into it, you go where the opportunities arise. And so I just decided to do that. So.
True. Well, I'm just so happy to talk to you today about what you've been through and everything. And so you've had a long career, and you've done a lot of playing as well as freelancing. So you've had to be quite adaptable to changing to different settings and picking up gigs and everything wherever you go. Would you say that this kind of tied into your injury when it came about?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. It's possible. It's funny, when I started my second 1-year position with the Philadelphia Orchestra as fourth horn, one of the things I went into the year saying to myself and really verbalizing to myself and to my husband, I have to figure out how to get to the end of this year and still be the versatile kind of player that I want to play, because it is very easy as a fourth horn player. And I think that many fourth horn players would agree with me on this. It is hard to sort of keep your entire range of skill level going. And that's something I was very aware of. And actually, when my injury occurred, it happened during a period of time where I was working really hard putting making sure that I had situations where I could be heard and also could sort of stretch those skills that don't get used as fourth horn. So hearing myself, number one, in the orchestra, getting used to being sort of in the hot seat or whatever, like hearing myself on stage in the context of a larger group. And, the high range and all of that. So I had actually placed some outside gigs in place for myself to sort of get myself in that head and keep that going. So that's kind of interesting, that question. It's hard to be a versatile horn player, and many horn players manage to do it. And I wouldn't say that was the one contributing thing. What really got me was the presence of a canker sore while I was trying to do all of that. So that's what got me, and I'm very prone to them. I've got one right here right now. But,
I usually get those when I use certain like toothpaste or something. It's like I tend to get them more, but I completely understand with the canker sore on the lip.
And I'm very prone to them, and I'd gotten them a lot, and I always just play through them, even if they're in the mouthpiece area, and it was no big deal. But this one was a little different. It was very, it was a really bad one, and it was right in the mouthpiece area. Yeah. So.
I thought I'd ask about that. The reason why I asked about the before about if this injury occurred while you were going through something that was like a change in setting or something like that, adapting, because most injuries are kind of when there's some type of big change going on, with your playing career or with something that kind of like external factor. But in your case, like you said, it was more of like something that you realized that was on the inside of your muscles or your lip.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot going on during that time. Like I say, I was playing fourth horn, and I had booked a gig for myself where I was playing first horn, and it was and then this canker sore came up right in the mouthpiece area, and it was so bad and so painful that I had to take some time off. I just couldn't play. It was too painful, and then I realized that it wasn't going to heal in the timeline that I needed for it to heal. And so I went ahead and went on with my gig, and it became pretty clear early on that I would have to move down in the section. Like I felt weak, and I couldn't play in the area strongly that I needed to play in. And so that's sort of how it unfolded for me.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, and then it's kind of frustrating because you probably thought like, well, this canker sore, it's just, gonna go away, and it's not something a big deal that I should make a big deal about. And then when it started affecting you that way, did it just kind of unravel into this situation, or did you try certain things?
Yeah, I tried everything. Everything that you would throw at a canker sore, I threw at it. And what I should have done, and I hate saying stuff like that because it makes it sound like, we can't go back in time. But anyway, what I should have done was just said, I'm sorry, I can't play this job. I can't do this. But it happened to be the busiest week on the East Coast. And like no horn players were available, 0. And so I was like, well, okay, if I move down in the section, I'll play fourth horn. I can hide, just play as little as possible. It should be okay. And I really did like play as absolutely little as possible. But by the third concert, that's when I started feeling like there was something really wrong. That's when I started feeling pain. And that's how it happened for me.
Goodness. Well, and
so I ended up having to take 6 weeks off. When I realized that there was something really wrong, I went to specialists in Baltimore, Dr. Vander Kolk, and he was working with a physical therapist, David Schulman, at the time, who I think is now retired. So I went to him, and you know, I was calling people, and the thought was that it was just slight muscle damage and that it would be healed up in, you know, 6 weeks time, no big deal. But it didn't really. I gave it a good 3 weeks rest. Not complete rest. I would say that I gave it a week of full, complete rest. And then I started playing like 5 minutes a day, just very gently, and trying to work back into it. And so I was able to play the summer season with the Philadelphia Orchestra, which was part of my contract, but I wasn't fully myself. So I was able to kind of get through it. And at the same time, I was preparing for the fourth horn audition for the permanent job, which is supposed to happen in October. So I had that kind of hanging over my head as well. And I really wanted to do that. And so, you know, I felt like it was my only, you know, that I needed to go for that if I possibly could. And so that's what I was working toward. And I did take that audition and was able to get to a place where I was like, well, I'm not completely me, not completely strong, but I'll just give it a shot, see what I can do. And although I did not win that audition and was not really in a place to win that audition strength-wise, I would say that I'm proud of having taken that audition and just gone for it, because I was able to play and to accomplish my goal of putting out there whatever I could. And so I did do that. And then it was a few weeks later, playing in the orchestra, where I started to feel little shadows of that coming back. And I actually put down the horn at that point for 3 months solid, thinking maybe I never really let it heal. And so I was like, I'm going to give it 3 months, and then I'll start back and see what happens. And
I mean, that has to be so scary too, because it's like you thought you're rid of it, and then for it to kind of have that little sensation come back, it's like, oh my goodness, what is going on? What's happening here?
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much that goes on in an injury recovery and in building back, that it's just all wrapped up, the physical and the mental and the emotional. It's all wrapped up in there. And I think that most people who have gone through you know, a significant injury would probably say that you can expect an entire range of emotions, and also what is called for at any particular time. So, you know, it's sort of like, there's that beautiful passage where there's a time to be born, a time to die, a time to laugh, a time to mourn, a time, you know, that beautiful passage. It's sort of like that in going through an injury recovery and rebuilding, to be honest, where there's a time to sit back, let it heal. There's a time to lean in and go for it. There's a time to listen what people have to say. There's a time to not listen to what people have to say. So it's I think that that's a tricky thing in talking about injuries, is that there's no pat answer for everything, and it really depends. You know, you really have to kind of find your way through, and which is not what people want to hear, I don't think. But you have to trust yourself and find your way through the best you can. And, you know,
That's so true. And you never know. It's one of those things where when you have the injury and it's occurring, it's hard to tell, like, you know, am I doing the right thing is it improving or is it getting worse? And then sometimes you do something where you think it's getting better and then it gets worse and you're like, or you don't not really sure what it is. You're like, what is going on here? What am I dealing with? Because so much of the injuries, they kind of cross, the same type of symptoms,
Yes.
like with overuse and nerve damage and those type of things.
Yes.
So when you were going to seek out help, like you said, you went to Dr. Vanderkolk, which for anybody that's watching, I think it's Dr. Vanderkolk and who's the other guy you said, Dr. Schulman?
Yeah,
And
well,
then
he's not a doctor, he's a physical
physical.
therapist, but they worked in tandem
Yeah,
with each other. Yeah.
they have a thing, a website called, I think it's called Brass Recovery or something, and
Oh,
I think they work with the tuba player in the Baltimore Symphony. I think they utilize him to help rehabilitate too, so over
yeah.
brass injuries. But he's a great person to go to if anybody's having any type of upper lip injuries, anything to do with nerve damage, anything to do with muscle tears in particular.
Right.
So that's a great resource. And we'll go ahead and put his information in the comments section for people who are who are wondering about it too.
Yeah.
So then when you went to him, did he say anything to you about like what you had, or did he kind of prescribe anything?
Yeah, it was, he thought that it was just a muscle sprain. So just not a tear, but just, slight separation, something that probably could turn into a tear if it were, if I just, blew through it too much. But I needed to rest and then slowly work into playing again. So that was the diagnosis. And but the fact that it didn't heal really for so long got me looking other places. And so I went to Dr. Stephen Frucht in New York, who works with a lot of musician injuries and has done a lot of work on dystonia. But he was recommended to me by a couple people and who live and work in New York. And so I went to him, and he said, well, I don't think you ever had muscle damage. I think it was nerve damage. And so that was interesting, new information. And so ever since then, I've kind of, my gut instinct is that there might have been a little of both. There might have been a little bit of muscle damage going on in the beginning. I don't know. I do believe that there is nerve damage because it's been so, it's been such a long process. And the process of working through that has been, it's been very interesting. Just, there came a point, I think it was in 2018, the injury happened in spring of 2017. In 2018, in the spring and into the summer, I started to feel like that so much of my focus had gone to this one little section in my lip that maybe I had like extra sensors there, like I was overly sensitive to everything that was going on there. And so I started to actively work on not desensitizing myself exactly, but just being aware of those sensations, but focusing on something else, putting my attention somewhere else, on something bigger, on something more important. And I have to tell you that through this whole process, from the moment, really very soon after I had the injury, through the present time, one of the things that's been the most help to me has been Alexander technique and the work of Ariel Weiss here in Philadelphia. And she was very helpful with helping me to know just where to place my attention. And so, not only working on sort of efficiency of the body and best use of the body, but really that's all tied into where your attention is placed. And so that was very helpful.
Yeah, I always see you post about her, and I love that you share her resources and her videos and everything that she does. Really quick before we go on, there was somebody that commented. They said, "What's the name of Dr. Vanderkolk?" So yeah, it's Dr. Vanderkolk and Mr. Schulman, who's the
David Schulman. Although I think he's retired, because somebody that I recommended go to him last year got back to me and said that they were closing up his office. So I don't know what's going on there exactly, but Dr. Craig Vanderkolk in Baltimore
and then Dr. I can never say his name, Dr. Frucht. He's the neurologist in and he's at Presbyterian, I think.
or you know, I'm blanking out right now as to what hospital
he's in Manhattan.
Works with.
I think, right?
He's in Manhattan, yeah. And Stephen Frucht is his name, and he's, you know, his papers are on the internet, and you can read about him.
He does so much great research, especially for musicians with dystonia. But he also he comes across a lot of people who have of nerve damage. Can you kind of describe what it feels like and what the sensation is, if there's any type of physical, like anything? Because I know, like with muscle tears, sometimes musicians will feel like a little lump in their upper lip. With nerve damage, sometimes it runs from the nose all the way down to the top of the lip here, because there's like a nerve or something right there. But can you kind of describe the physical sensations for those who might not know what it felt like?
Well, I think it's going to be different for every person. For me, it was very subtle. The test that he did was sort of like if you were to take, you know, a toothpick or a multi-pronged, like wooden, you know, like a wooden whisk or something, very delicate, and see if there's any difference in sensation from side to side. And I had a little bit less sensation over here. But it was very subtle. Very subtle. Some people have, you know, pain, like outright pain. And I did experience little, you know, twinges of pain from time to time. That hasn't happened in a very long time. But I think by the time I went to see him, it was more, you know, I would have the occasional like zinger, but not very often, but it was more just like having full sensation and control over that one little section of lip.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. And like you said, Alexander technique really helped you a lot with your playing and everything. Can you kind of describe, like, maybe are there certain exercises that you did that you incorporated in your playing that kind of helped you, like maybe when you went to rehearsals or kind of prep work that you did?
Well, it would depend on what point in time you're talking about, but I would say that I really went back to basics in rebuilding, and I also, what became very helpful for me was, again, getting that attention away from here and out there, out into the hall, out into the room. And so, and even you know, even in thinking about, you know, we can use our imaginations in such vivid ways that are sometimes very helpful. Sometimes it's not helpful, but sometimes it is. And, you know, just really just externalizing the, you know, for instance, I would start to feel, I would concentrate on the airflow and feeling the airflow out the bell of the horn, even though we can't really feel the air come out the bell of the horn. You know, you can kind of imagine that, and just to get my attention on my hand, for instance, instead of right here, or you know, visually placing, you know, actually placing my eyes far beyond, rather than getting internal like this. Just really making sure I was out there and connected to everything, rather than in here and closed off. So that was a major help to me.
That makes a lot of sense too, because I feel like that also applies to those with focal dystonia too, because we tend to get really lost with this lack of sensation, like right up front. Like they say with people who have hand dystonia, it's like they get lost on the little perception of their fingertip. And it's like you kind of have to do this macro view where you kind of back out and you're like, wait a second, if I get too focused on this one area, it's just gonna cause me to overcompensate and, you know, do things that maybe aren't the best with my playing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like that is really helpful advice for those who to maybe have injuries, maybe a way of looking at it and handling it too, because our body does play a huge role in recovery, you know, as far as focus and where we put our focus and intention into
Yeah.
our playing.
Yes, absolutely.
So with this injury, like you said, there's different stages, right? As you were recovering, was there a point where you kind of started to feel like, okay, this is getting better. I feel really good about this. If that stage happened, like, what about kind of like what were you doing in that stage, or if there's any type of sensations that you felt that change or anything?
You know, I can't say that there was anything particular that happened. It's just been a very slow, gradual process, and I'm still in that process. So even though well, now, I mean, it's a very strange time because none of us are performing. Well, few of us are performing.
Yeah.
Um, but let's talk about up to the pandemic. Um, I was able to perform and play, not feeling like completely myself at all, but feeling like I was on a good path and getting there. And so that's where I am. And of course now everything is interrupted because we aren't performing, and when we're playing in groups is when I'm playing, let me just speak for myself, when I play in a group is where I sort of just take stock of where I am, you know, how much I'm able to play, how much I feel like I can give volume wise. And it's really hard to replicate that in the practice room. So where I am right now is I'm of course practicing every day. In some days it's sort of the same as it was before the pandemic, before all of our performing stopped, where some days I feel like I'm healed, and other days I feel like this is still really hard, you know, and I think it's gonna be like that for a while, and that's okay if it's like that for a while. And for me, going forward, I feel like I'll just keep going forward. I'll just keep putting one foot in front of the other, and see where it leads me. And I feel like I am on a good trajectory, and we'll just see where it goes once we're back to kind of normal life. And I just kind of, you know, in a holding pattern right now while we're waiting to be in sort of our usual real musical life, our full musical
Yeah.
life.
And yeah, it's one of those things where I feel like maybe it's good in the sense that it's like you get some time to pace yourself and practice and work on things. But at the same time, it's horrible that so many musicians are, you know, affected by this pandemic. Like I feel it really heavily. Like it's just really sad. But in a way, at least you get a little bit of time to recover and focus on healing. As you were going through your injury initially, were you able to talk to other people around you about it, or were you kind of just keeping it kind of close to your heart, or like did you have any problems with colleagues or anything like that?
No, I have to say, and I think that times have changed. I think that maybe 30 years ago, it might have been something that I didn't want to talk about very much. But no, I felt very, very supported from the horn section at the Philadelphia Orchestra. They were super supportive, and helped make it possible for me to get through that summer season and play what I could play, and without overextending myself. And they were just incredibly wonderful about that. And I was just completely floored by the generosity of all of those that I talked with. And I think I would encourage anybody going through an injury to reach out, reach out, reach out. Just put yourself out there. Go ahead and give a person a call. Doesn't matter if you don't know them. Just go ahead and call, because most of the time people are really eager for their experience, what they've gone through, to help somebody else. So I would just encourage people going through an injury to go ahead and call anybody that they think could help them. And I think that there's no danger in putting yourself out there too much, because there's not going to be anybody whose experience is going to exactly line up with yours. So, you know, there will be things that don't apply anyway, but you get little bits of wisdom from each person you talk to. And so that's sort of what led to the idea of me establishing the website Musicians Well, was because it was so helpful for me to just hear people's stories. You know, not necessarily to even receive a diagnosis on my own injury, or to get their take on it. More just hearing their stories and hearing what they did, and seeing how just resilient people are is an incredible. It's just incredible to read those stories and to hear people's stories. So I wanted to gather them all together and just have that as a resource for people.
Yeah, and I'm so proud of the work you do, because I mean it is so helpful. And I feel like you said, with musicians with injuries, it's so hard for some of us to open up about it. But like you said, it's one of the things you should encourage people to do, because I think once you do it, it's like you kind of have this relief, like, okay, I finally said it to someone, or I talked to someone about it, and they're able to relate in some way. And it's just so helpful. And I love the interviews that you do, because you write them so well. Like, there's something with their way of wording things. Like, you do such a great job at the interviews you do. And I just feel like it's helped so much with kind of propelling this openness that's been needed, this openness of talking about injuries, which I advocate for so much as well, because I just want to be able to have a more open book about it and talking openly about it. Because I feel like, yeah, once you hear people's stories, it's almost heartbreaking sometimes, because it's like, you know, some, especially the older generation, some of them have been like, you know, I haven't been able to talk to anyone about this because back then it was impossible, or some of them recently get diagnosed with like dystonia or something, and they're just going through such a difficult time. And so to be able to come across these stories and see that, especially professional musicians like yourself speaking out about it, it's just really inspiring, and it helps every person of every skill level who's gone through an injury to feel like they can speak openly about it. So I just want to thank you for that.
Sure. And one other thing that I would say about injury in general is sometimes we have this sense that because we've experienced an injury, we are less than somehow, that it was our fault, it was a lack of solid technique, or something that we could have done differently, or that somehow we failed. And I think that I would encourage people to experience an injury to consider that sometimes life just happens. You know, sometimes you fall on your face on a rock. I did that. Sometimes a violin case just falls on your face. That also happens to me. Sometimes you get a canker sore at the wrong place at the wrong time. Sometimes you know, and with dystonia, there's nothing that you've done to cause this. It's a condition.
Mm-hmm.
And so life happens. And I think, you know, if we can sort of get rid of the guilt or the feeling of being less than, and just approach the situation that life has given us with the fullness of our being, right? With openness and realizing that we will be okay and that we are okay. That is the most important thing and the most helpful thing.
Yes, that's so true. And I mean, it's so great that that you speak so openly about your story too as well, and sharing your story. So I'm thankful for that today, that you've been able to share and discuss your injury as well and the process you've gone through. We have a person that commented. Let's see here. Bruce, he says, I've recovered from dystonia. I also had nerve damage and a loss of use from dental procedures. Yeah, Bruce, I'm so sorry about that. I mean, that's really difficult because, yeah, I feel like musicians, even if we haven't had like a severe injury, I feel like there's always something that musicians deal with, some type of setback in some form, whether it's from age or from like a dental procedure or from some type of like, you know, back pain, or they have to have like a hip replacement or just anything. I mean, our physical bodies are just, you know, worn out over time, and so I feel like this is such an important area to discuss, because it's like we've neglected it so long, talking about musician health, and I think that's really wonderful that people are being more open about it, especially the body semantics like Alexander technique and Feldenkrais and Rolfing and that kind of thing. It's really helpful. So you guys, we're going to go ahead and put the links afterwards. We'll put the links for the Miss West, you said? Miss, who was the Alexander technique practitioner?
Oh, Ariel Weiss, Weiss.
Okay.
And you can find her at, I think it's alexandertechniquephiladelphia.com. But if you were just to Google her name and Alexander Technique, that would come up. And she also has a Facebook page that's specifically geared towards musicians called Move Free, Play Free. And she has a lot of wonderful videos that she posts there sometimes, and things that can be very helpful. So take a look at that.
Bruce says, he said, I rehabbed with David Vining. I'm from Philadelphia. Oh, nice to meet you, Bruce. And that's really great that you worked with David. Yeah. I know David runs his own, I think it's Peak Performance website, where he talks about his injury as well, and overcoming focal dystonia. Really great resource. Yeah. Well, Angela, let's go ahead and talk about like maybe so now you're stuck with the pandemic kind of holding you back from performing and everything. What is there anything in particular that you're kind of working on right now, as far as you've recovered, like certain exercises or anything that kind of you feel kind of fits your needs? Because I know it's individually, you know, how we can able to apply our playing to certain injuries, but is there anything in particular that you feel like, yeah, this is working for me right now?
Well, life is very strange right now. And so I'm very limited in the amount of time that I have to practice. So, you know, to be honest, I'm lucky if I get in 1 45-minute session a day. And I try to get in 2, but some days it just can't happen, just because, you know, we have no childcare. And
I was gonna say, you just had a baby too, like not long ago. Yeah.
Yeah, I have now a 9-year-old, and I have a 10-month-old, almost 11-month-old. So, so anyway, just the way life is right now, I have very limited time to practice. So I make the most of that time. And I have the things that I do, which is a little bit of buzzing, breathing, a little bit of buzzing, and then chromatics. That's something that Gail Williams sort of mentioned to me early on in my injury. She was like, I think the horn players don't do enough chromatics. And so I have chromatics that I work through and get up through whatever range I'm feeling good with that day, which now is pretty much the entire range most days. And then harmonic series and scales. And then if I have time, I'll pull out some some etudes, or I'll pull out excerpts, or whatever. I try to play something that is music that feels like that I can put my musical soul into it a little bit each day, and then that's it for the day. So I have a very sort of compact session that I'm able to do, and that's what's working for me. And so I don't really have any big things going on right now as far as horn goes, except for just really making sure that I'm maintaining. And of course, there are variations on that, and there are things that I think about during my practice time. Always this, getting outside of myself, making sure where my attention is placed out there and those sorts of things. But beyond that, my day-to-day life right now is more exploring other parts of my life and enjoying being with my kids and with my husband, and enjoying the things that we have to enjoy about our home life, which is a lot. And I feel very grateful every day, despite how difficult many of the days are, and how difficult the times are in general. I feel very, very grateful and happy to be able to share this sweet time with my children. And yeah, so that's where I am.
Well, congratulations on your new baby. And I think I saw a birthday balloon in the background at one point. So happy birthday.
Yeah, my son just turned 9.
Oh, that's awesome. What a wonderful age. Yeah, one of my favorite ages. I feel like they're great.
It's fantastic. They still love stuffed animals, but they can talk to you about some big stuff too.
Yeah, they're not quite preteen. Not yet. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I have an 11-year-old nephew that lives in the same house. So
wonderful.
But I'm just so grateful for you sharing your journey and about what you've gone through, and especially all the advice too. And I just want to ask one last question, which I always ask everyone. And this is kind of a broad question again, but you've obviously interviewed so many people that have gone through injuries or focal dystonia. What would you say, like, if for people who have been recently diagnosed with an injury or focal dystonia or some type of setback, what would be some general advice you would give them coming from your experience?
Oh, that's so tough. I guess I would just say, know that there is support and help out there for you. That many, many people have gone through this. And honestly, most musicians at some point in their lives, in their professional lives, experience something. It may not be something that it takes them out of performing necessarily, but everybody experiences something, almost everybody. And so know that there's support out there, and that that no matter what comes your way, you will be able to handle it, because you will. It's just people are resilient, and you can be resilient too. Reach out to people, and realize that there will be some things that are said to you that will not apply to you or will not be helpful for you, and that's okay. And there was one person that I talked with, that I consulted with, who, the vast majority of what this person had to say was not so helpful, but there was one thing that this person said that was very, very helpful. And so, there will be lots of instances like that, and to not get discouraged when that kind of thing happens. Yeah, I think those are the main things. I know there's sort of like bigger things and not very specific things,
No, it's
but
so great.
that's what I've
I love
got.
it. I love it, and that's really good advice about the kind of like taking what applies to you, what you feel is most beneficial for you, and then not letting anything that's not so great for you deter you from focusing on the good. Because yeah, we definitely come across that
Yes.
sometimes in recovery. Um, and it's hard, you know, sometimes when you're going through an injury because you're kind of just reaching out to everyone that you can find and saying like, well, what should I do? What should I do? What should I do? And it's very hard to filter through all the advice you get. But like you said, it's best to take it with a grain of salt and not let anything kind of get you down, especially if they say something that's kind of seems critical, you
Mhm.
know, of your playing. So that's very important, I feel. One last question for you, and this is going to be a fun question.
Okay.
And it's a kind of a broad question, but as a horn player, I have to ask, what is one of your biggest inspirations as far as horn playing? Like maybe your favorite horn player, even though I know there's like several. But maybe when you're growing up, what was your biggest influence?
Well, I started off listening to Herman Bauman. He was the first horn player that I listened to. I have to say that over the years, um, one of my favorite horn players that I always go back to listening over and over again is Radovan Blatkovich. I love his
Oh
playing.
my goodness, yes.
I love his playing, and he's also a really wonderful person. So I love listening to him. I love listening to his ideas when he talks as well. And you can hear a lot of his ideas on playwithapro.com. He's got uh, courses out there that you can listen to, and master classes that are out there. I mean, you can find tons of stuff about him. So he's one of my favorites. Yeah, I mean, I love so many horn players. If I were to start listing them, but he's one that I over the years. So like since I was, let's say, high school through the present. So we're talking a long time now, like 30 years. Um, he's one that I've consistently gone back to and always love hearing.
I
So
love that. I have to agree with you too. I
yeah.
absolutely love his playing. Absolutely. I don't think there's a player where it's so I don't know how to describe it because it's like yeah, he has kind of like a good mix of all the different kind of cultural horn playing tied together. It's like he's not really German sounding, he's not really American sounding, he's not really, you know, and it's just like this nice consistency. And it's just, yeah, I don't know what it is, but just something so unique about his playing too.
Yeah, and just a musician through and through. Just
Yeah.
an amazing musician. Yeah.
Well, really wonderful. And yeah, I just had to ask something at the end because I'm like, I keep forgetting. I'm like, whenever I interview horn players, I'm always so curious. I have to ask. I have to ask.
Yeah.
Well, Angela, it's been so wonderful chatting with you and going over your injury. And also for you guys out there, definitely check out her website, Musicians Well. And she writes articles or interviews with musicians who have been injured. And she, especially Angela, you have such great connections because she's interviewed some really well-known musicians that have faced setbacks and overcome them or face some type of injury. And so we'll go ahead and put her information in the comment section as well for her website. And Angela, I just want to say thank you so much for doing this. It's been such a great honor to interview you, and I've been waiting to do this forever. And, and I'm hoping that I can do more as well and maybe come back and do another interview with you again later.
Thank you so much, Katie, and thank you for all the work that you do too. This is really important work, and I thank you for it.
Well, thank you, Angela. Well, I hope you have a wonderful day and that you get some good quality time with your kids and husband.
Thank you. Will
All right.
do. Bye.
Bye.